What up, what up, what up, everybody? This is the Dr. Football Podcast. I am your host, Dr. Dennis Teehan. Joining me, as always, the CEO of Hedge Better, Justin Fein. We're recording remote tonight. Justin in the Hedge Better studio in Braintree. I'm in my office in Dedham. How you doing, my man? What's going on, Justin?
You know, I'm doing great. Getting ready for the weekend. Super exciting night last night. I'm sure we're going to get into it. Some may call it the most exciting thing that's happened at Gillette Stadium in years.
Yeah, it was a great show. We were both lucky enough to be there. Yeah. Of course, it was an absolutely gorgeous night. Couldn't ask for better weather.
Yep.
And it was a terrific show. It was just a terrific, I thought, celebration for Brady, for his career. But I did have some observations about it, and that's what we're going to talk about. This is going to be the episode today. There's not a lot that's really happened. Yeah. With the Pats over the last 2 or 3 weeks since we last recorded. We can still talk a little bit about minicamp if we have time at the end, but it really is, this is really the biggest news story in Patriots Nation really right now. Yeah,
100%. And like you said, great night. I definitely noticed a couple things too. Curious what some of your takeaways were.
Well, let's get to it. So I'm going to kick it off with the opening take to begin the podcast. And what I'm going to say, Justin, is this, and I don't know if you read what I wrote on our Facebook page today, but as I was walking out of Gillette Stadium and driving home last night, even though it was an absolutely amazing celebration and it was top-notch, world-class, terrific, positive vibes, awesome recognition of what Brady did, I felt a little sad. And I felt a little sad because it really just hammered home for me the fact that it's over.
Yep.
The dynasty is over. Brady is over. Belichick is over. It's gone.
Yep.
And, obviously we all knew that we're not going to see Tom Brady ever play again in a Patriots uniform. It's been 4 years.
Yep.
But last night really hammered it home. That amazing thing, what we saw here over the last 20 years was the most amazing thing that's happened in modern professional sports.
Yep.
And I think you could easily argue, and we're all sports fans, we all love competition, but Brady and Belichick was so great to root for because they just did it right. Yeah. And because they were just so excellent at what they did. And everything they did, they did it the right way on and off the field for the most part. There were some exceptions, and it led to amazing results. We are never going to see something like that again. We can be Patriots fans. We can root for the Patriots. We can follow sports, root for other teams, appreciate competition in general. That 20-year run we just witnessed was the best, as good as it gets. It was the best it's ever gotten. And it's never going to be that good again. And that was a little sad for me.
Oh, 100%. I mean, I sat there with Alyssa and, the thoughts that kept running through my mind was, it was such a nostalgic night, right? Like reliving the last 2+ decades. But again, to your point, it really did remind you that those are memories. Those are distant memories, and we are not the same Patriots organization. We do not have the same prospects of winning. We do not have the same level of talent. We do not have the same appeal, I think, to the rest of the league that we once did, right? Like it's a completely different ball game. And I was happy to see it celebrated and kind of, close the end of that chapter, I think, appropriately. But it really did just hammer home the fact that is in the past and the future is totally, totally ambiguous.
As much as it was a night honoring Tom Brady, Justin, at times it felt like a funeral for the dynasty.
Right.
Yeah. You've got Brady, Belichick, and Kraft there. That's probably the last time they'll all be together on the field at Gillette Stadium.
Yep.
How many hundreds of times have they all been there together? Various wins, whatever. 200 former players. You got all the fans there. A lot of those fans are fans that have been season ticket holders since the early 90s. Been to almost every game like me. I know you go to a lot of games too. It was like a funeral. It was like a funeral. It was like a celebration of life. Let's go down memory lane. Let's start at the very beginning, 2001. Let's talk about all these great moments. Let's tell all these stories. Let's share some anecdotes. It was like a funeral for the dynasty as much as it was just a night honoring Tom Brady.
Yeah, it really was like an in memoriam for 3 hours, pretty much, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
It was.
Yeah.
It was a memoriam. It was a memoriam to the dynasty.
Yeah. Yeah, it was. And like I said, it definitely made me appreciate what we experienced, right? I ran through countless memories in my head, right? Different games, regular season, playoff, Super Bowl, all the different emotions we went through. But yeah, it's really what it was. It was to look back on fond times and remember, because that they're not there anymore.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. And it's like, if you're a fan and you're sitting at home watching the game, and what is more frustrating than when a player doesn't really care or give it their all, and you're sitting there saying, if only I had that physical ability, I would give everything, right? Yep. And you look at a guy like Tom Brady. One of the reasons it was so great to root for him is because he cared so much. Yep. He cared as much as you did. He cared as much as any fan did. He had more. He gave 120% for 20 years. And that's what made him so great to root for. I don't know if they make players like that anymore, or many of them.
No. And I mean, you know what? Even when Tom Brady was in his career, there weren't many like him. And to your point, it is a definitely a diminishing type of player and type of personality, type of mindset that you see amongst today's pros. But I mean, that's what made him the GOAT, right? That's what made him great, was the fact that even when he was playing, there weren't many like him.
Yeah, totally. And I think people shouldn't lose sight of the fact, Justin, and this might be harder for, you and your generation to see than mine, but like, if you really look at like what the golden age of the NFL was, and I would say that it really began in the mid to late 80s, the golden time, and you could argue that it's still ongoing. You could argue it ended at different points. I mean, that's debatable, but I think it began in the mid to late 80s. And how important the Patriots are to really the story of the NFL, and sort of becoming this dominant franchise during really what I would say was the golden age of the NFL. And the beginning of that golden age happens in the NFC with the Bears and the Redskins and the Giants, and the Dallas Cowboys, and how Parcells and Belichick were just so plugged in and tied into all that, and how they ended up bringing their program up here to New England and then back down to New York to the Jets, and how all that kind of just tied in to really this confluence of circumstances where now this story, this New England Patriots story, really is the story of the NFL, or at least the modern NFL, of like that golden age. And I think that you can't look past the significance of that.
No, not at all. I mean, they affected the game in so many ways. I mean, even just something simple, like when they mentioned the other night, the first team to come out of the tunnel in the Super Bowl is a team, right? It's just they've done things in a macro level. They've done things in a micro level. And really, I think, the reason, even just think about today's NFL, right? When we talk about Mahomes and we talk about the Chiefs, when we talk about anybody else, who do we compare them to? We compare them to Tom Brady in the Patriots dynasty and what the Patriots did, right? Like, they set that standard, I think, for modern football, and everybody else is kind of chasing that legacy.
Yeah. And you look across the league, and like, you bring up Mahomes, and they have a great thing going on right now. And we're all still watching pro football because it's obviously the best sport. But I'm sorry, I feel like they're really starting to tinker with the rules now. The kickoff thing this year is a big thing. The rules are so tilted. You can barely tackle. You can barely touch the quarterback. It's become a different game that we all still love and watch. But I don't think it's as good as it was, like, say, 10 or certainly 20 years ago. And I think because of that, like, I don't know, like, I just feel like, can you have that? The Patriots dynasty happened at a time when the product was so quality, the league was so good, and the football was just so terrific on both sides of the ball, and you had to be on both sides of the ball good to win, generally speaking. I don't know if that happens in today's league, the way things are now.
No, and you know what? Going back to something we said in a podcast, weeks ago, you wonder if all these rule changes, these offensive-minded rule changes, right, things that are being done to kind of kickstart some of these offenses and you get the scoring back up, the offensive production back up. In Brady's era, look at the quarterbacks that were in and out of that league, right? I mean, you had the number of Hall of Fame quarterbacks that just played at the same time as Brady, right? You talk about the Peyton Mannings, the Drew Breeses, the Aaron Rodgers, Ben Roethlisberger's. You can go on, you can go on and on. And that's something that today's NFL doesn't have. It's a transitioning NFL. There's a couple of very good quarterbacks that you can't deny they're very good quarterbacks, but in the modern era, who's gone and won Super Bowls, right? It's Patrick Mahomes, right? There's really not many other quarterbacks that you look at and say, okay, these are champions. These are future Hall of Famers. These are guys that you can count on. And I think the league is really trying to usher in that next generation of it guys, the quarterbacks that dominate the league, and we just don't have many of them right now.
Yeah, and I mean they can only do so much too in that regard to usher it in. At the end of the day, the guys have to be there, and I think right now it really isn't the same. I mean, you had this like run where you had these pillars of the NFL the league was built on, and Brady was like the king of kings, but you also had Rodgers and Breeze and Manning and Roethlisberger, and that was just such an epic run because they all went back and forth, in so many different ways, and there was some other side shows, Russell Wilson popped in there for a minute and Joe Flacco won a ring. And it was just such great theater to watch all that play out over 20 years. And you can't force that if you're the league. They're trying to create that, but there's only so much they can do.
Right. And look, I mean, I want the league to be great just as much as anybody else, right? To me, it's not about just the Patriots being the best team. I love football. You love football, right? We want a good product to watch. We want to be fans of the league just as much of our team. And I think that's really what they're trying to push for, because around the league, it's tough to find guys to get behind that aren't part of, your organization. And yeah, I really think they're just trying to broaden not only the appeal, but the marketability of some of these guys that they need to be the next stars.
Yeah, they're trying to make them into that, but that doesn't mean that they actually will be that when it comes down to performance. No question about it. The other thing, Justin, I want to bring up about last night, and we've talked about this before, but it would be absolutely remiss if I didn't bring this up. And, Tom Brady ends his speech last night by saying, "I am Tom Brady. I am a Patriot."
Yep.
And that was just a terrific moment, but it really just hammered home to me the fact Tom Brady should never, ever, ever have left Foxborough. It should have never happened. It was such a colossal mistake and organizational failure on every level that he had to go to Tampa Bay for those last 3 years. It should have never got to that point.
It should have never got to, 100%. And it's bittersweet seeing Tom and Bill so cordial and warm with each other, because it's like, by one token, it's like, I love seeing that relationship's intact, that a lot of the media coverage throughout the years may have been a little bit overblown, right? Like they still clearly have a lot of love and respect for each other. So like, I love that, but it's bittersweet because it makes me a little angry. And I say, well, then how the hell couldn't they have worked it out and come to an agreement or figured something out that kept Tom Brady in Gillette the rest of his career?
I had the same exact thought. I'm like, if these guys are getting along so good, then why did things get so south back in 2020 and 2019 and 2018 to get them to the point where they couldn't even agree on a basic contract? And, Justin, on some level, we talk a lot about it being a personal thing, but maybe it wasn't as much a personal thing as it was just a personnel decision by Belichick that he didn't believe that Brady really had it anymore. And let's face it, God, was he wrong about that? And to the point where if you really look at what cost Bill Belichick his job in New England and why he isn't the head coach here anymore, it is 100% all goes back to that one decision, which is to force Tom Brady out the door and have no real relevant plan for a succession plan for that. That ultimately was Belichick's undoing.
Yep.
But I think, it was a huge mistake that really, I don't know. I get it. I get why Belichick did it. But I just feel like at the end of the day, it really is a shame that it got to that point.
It is. It's definitely a shame. And you know what? It's obviously, it's spilt milk now, right? There's nothing you can do about it. But just,
Yeah.
I think for people like us who relished what we had for so long and never wanted to see it end, we look at it and we say, wow, we could have got a few more years. We could have got another Super Bowl or two. And
Absolutely.
I personally feel like we were robbed of that.
Right. And to be honest, and I've said this before, but I would have taken a few 6 and 10 seasons at the end if it meant he finished out to the very end here. Like I was totally comfortable, 2014, 15, 16. I was totally comfortable with saying, hey, keep signing this guy, give him what he wants.
Mm-hmm.
And if it falls apart and you get 2 or 3 bad years at the end, that's the price you have to pay for having the 20 good years. Belichick didn't see it that way. Right. He thought that he could continue this program and this thing going on without Brady. And I understand why he wanted to do that. But the problem is he didn't really have any clear replacement plan. He valued way too much on the program and not enough on the people that really made that program. And there was nothing here when Brady was gone to carry the torch. And that's why it all fell apart.
Exactly. I mean, we've said it before. And Tom, I think, said it great the other night. He said it wasn't you, it wasn't me, it was us, right?
That's right.
I think we saw that Belichick, as great of a coach he was, as great of a system as he had implemented, as great of a culture that the Patriot way was, when you lost the guy, your leader, in and on and off the fields, your stallion, your steed, the guy who won you 6 Super Bowls, everything else kind of fell apart. It's like, you tore down part of the foundation of the house and then wondered why the rest of it collapsed.
Yeah, that's well said. And that's exactly what happened. I mean, you look back and I'm like, is it possible that they could have kept this thing going without Brady if Belichick had done a better job of planning that succession? I know he drafted Garoppolo. I think it was in 2014. That was obviously way too soon. They went ahead and won 3 Super Bowls after that. Belichick said, it's better to be too early than too late at that position.
Right.
And then he went ahead 4 or 5 years later and then completely ignored the quarterback position 4 or 5 years later. So it just doesn't make a lot of sense. I mean, I think at the end of the day, look, I have the utmost respect for Belichick. I think he is a terrific coach. I think he is underrated as a GM over the whole course of his 20 years. But I think at the end, a lot of the things stopped working.
Yep.
And I think that he mangled this Brady situation so bad. And it really deprived all of us Patriots fans of what should have been a couple more years of Brady in Patriots uniform. That's the bottom line.
100%. Yep.
Let's talk a little bit about Belichick, Justin, since we're on the topic of Bill. And I have to say, and I think you'll agree with this, that of everyone last night, who got the loudest ovation? I think you could argue it was actually Belichick got a louder ovation than Brady.
Oh, the loudest and the longest. I mean, it took Bill about 2-3 minutes just to be able to talk once he got up to the podium. The crowd crescendoed about 2 or 3 times. It would die down. It would pick back up. You could clearly feel the love and the respect that the fans had for Bill and what he accomplished there.
I was glad to see that because I just feel like there's been so much negative said about Belichick over the last few years. His star has fallen a little bit. He's still a legend. And, everything with the Dynasty documentary and the hit piece on that, it made me feel really good that the actual real people that actually follow this team, the real fans of this team that go to that stadium, value what he did here for the last 20 years. And for all the noise and the BS around him and all the negativity of the last few years and certainly the post-Brady era, that at least people still at the end of the day can step back and respect what Belichick did and how amazing of a coach he was.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what? You'd be a fool not to be able to recognize that. Yes, he made mistakes at the end. Yes, ultimately it helped lead to the downfall of the dynasty, but the dynasty was going to end inevitably one way or another at some point anyway. Did it end a little prematurely? Yes, but did we still have the best 20-year run out of arguably any franchise in history? Yes.
Yeah, and I mean, look, you just hit on a huge point. Was let's not forget. Yeah, did Belichick mangle this from years 19 to 22 or whatever? Yeah, he did. How many people have been able to keep it going for 17, 18, 19 years in NFL history? Let me answer that. No one.
Yep.
It's never been done before. So you're gonna rip the guy to shreds because it fell apart after 2 decades, or do you praise him because it lasted 2 decades, which is longer than any other run has ever made it?
Exactly. And I think that was the sentiment of the crowd last night, right? I don't think anybody was holding on to the bitterness of the end. I think everybody was there to relish in the good times. And I think you felt that support from the crowd.
Yeah. Do you still wish Belichick was coach here, though? Just last night, did it make you feel how did it make you feel about the fact that he's not going to be here next year?
It was very weird, kind of realizing that, that's one of the last times you'll see Bill Belichick in Gillette Stadium on that field, right? Again, it's a combination of things, because it's obviously, I'm sad that he's not coaching. I'd love to see him coaching. But I look at what happened the last couple of years and I say, okay, I understand it. And again, it just goes back to the overarching feeling of disappointment, because I can understand why he's not here, but I would obviously love to see him here. And I just, things they didn't work out the way that I would have liked. But yeah, it was definitely bittersweet seeing Belichick up there, knowing that he's not going to be the head coach this season on the sidelines.
I guess we'll never know how realistic it was that if Belichick could have stayed here but not been the GM. And I think that that question, that possibility really takes place on 2 levels. One is, was Belichick formally willing to give up the title and let someone else pick the players? But then secondly, would that even work, given how deeply ingrained into the organization Bill Belichick's tentacles were? Like, everyone could have been on board, including Belichick, with bringing in a new GM, and it still could have not really work, because Belichick could just be so, like Stalin, it's like in Soviet Union. It's like you can't get rid of someone with that kind of influence, and just expect it to. Maybe you need a clean break, is I guess my point is. But last night, I have to say, I'm watching the ceremony, and part of me is like, I really wish there was some way they could have worked it out and Belichick was still here.
Yep.
And I don't know. I still don't know if they actually did the right thing. I had a lot of mixed feelings about this. I know you did too. Certainly things weren't working here for a long time, but I do wonder if maybe there was the opportunity to try a different organizational structure, bring in a real GM, bring in some real personnel people, let them pick the players, and see if Belichick would have gone along with that, and if that might have worked. And instead, they really are going now into a totally brave new world with no tie to the dynasty.
They are. And that brings me to something that I noticed about his speech, right? And maybe you're getting to this point, but I want to say there were 2 things that I noticed about Bill's speech last night, right? First off, before I get to those, I want to say, I think Bill did a great job making his speech about Tom and the team, right? There was very little, him trying to take credit or him talking about his accomplishments or his role, right? He did a very good job of keeping it about Tom Brady and the team, mainly Tom Brady. The 2 things that I thought was super interesting, going back to the fact that he's not here anymore, is that, correct me if I'm wrong, I paid pretty close attention, I may have missed it, but I didn't hear him mention Gerard Mayo once, and wishing him success as the new head coach, and talking about Gerard's ability to take this team over and pick the reins up. And I also didn't notice any sort of shout out, mention of gratitude towards Robert Kraft. So those were the 2 things that I noticed about that speech. And again, it leads me to believe that, Bill and Tom, they still love each other. They got a lot of respect for each other, but I think Bill is still salty that he is not the coach of the New England Patriots.
I agree. And those are 2 great observations. And you're 100% right. And you can read a lot into those omissions, and you should, because I think they say volumes about things. But, Justin, remember too, like, Brady and Belichick, they really didn't smooth it over for like a good year or so after everything fell apart here. So I think there's still that opportunity for Kraft and Belichick to kind of bridge loose ends. But I agree with that. And tell me if you noticed this too. Gerard Mayo was introduced at the start of this thing, and he really didn't get much of an ovation from the crowd. And I did take notice of that because I do feel like, look, people are going to keep an open mind about Mayo, and they absolutely should. But if you look at the offseason this guy's had and the way that he has presented himself to the media, and he just kind of blithering on some of the things he said. And I think people notice that stuff. And I think no one wants to rush to judge Gerard Mayo. He could end up being a terrific head coach for all we know. But I think people are a little nervous based on how they've seen Mayo handling the media, the way he's kind of spoken too openly, about things, the way he's kind of rambled on at times, the corporate jargon he uses. I think people are a little nervous about Mayo. It didn't seem like, I thought people would be jacked and pumped about, giving Gerard Mayo a round of applause or a nice welcome the first time he appears in Gillette Stadium as a head coach in front of a crowd. And actually, it was a pretty tepid response.
It was. I will say, disclaimer, like in fairness, I feel like, it was the beginning. There were still some people like getting to their seats, getting concessions, things like that. So maybe that had a little bit to do with it. But going back to what we said at the very beginning about being reminded that the dynasty is over and this is all over, Gerard Mayo is that physical embodiment of the dynasty being over. If you think about it, right? And you have everybody there that's trying to remember the past and celebrate Tom and celebrate this dynasty and celebrate all the success we had. And Gerard Mayo is a staunch reminder that is no longer the case. And it's not his fault, but to the point we made earlier, I think it almost has more of a negative connotation that night because it's a reminder that we moved in a new direction and we're not continuing where we had left off.
Yeah. I mean, I can say for one, I'm very concerned about Gerard Mayo. I'm very concerned about him. And I think a lot of Patriots fans are.
And everybody should be. I don't know why anybody would be 100% confident in a guy who has no head coaching experience, and is taking things in a completely different direction than you're used to. I think that's just natural human nature to be a little wary, right?
How about this one? They talk all offseason about breaking down silos, and then they make an organizational structure that has two parallel tracks that both lead to the owner. So Mayo doesn't answer to Wolf, and Wolf doesn't answer to Mayo, but they both answer to the owner. To me, that's the definition of a silo, right? So when you go out and you say all off season and you throw all this corporate mumbo jumbo at us, and then the first thing you guys do is basically make an organizational structure that I think is almost going to engender division in some ways. That makes me, those are the things I see that I'm like, what the hell is going on down there?
Yeah. And I guess I don't really understand it because, we gave the Crafts a lot of praise over the years for knowing their place as an owner and not inserting themselves where they didn't need to be, their opinions didn't need to be had. And now you're almost, I feel like you're kind of flipping that switch and you're saying, well, both the head coach and the GM are separately reporting directly to ownership. And it almost feels like they're now reversing that and inserting themselves into a position where they now are liable. They now are responsible. They now do have to take accountability for what happens. And before we used to say it's Bill. Bill's the GM. Bill's the coach. And now both. It starts at the top with the ownership and it feeds into the GM and the coach now. And that I think is going to be something new too. Seeing the Crafts actually inserting themselves as decision makers and as authorities. I
mean, for the first time since the late 90s, the Crafts are now the blast shield, right? For 20 something years, this was Belichick's operation, and for better or for worse, usually for better. But whatever happened, it blew back to Bill Belichick. And now the Crafts are totally going to be held accountable for whatever happens. What happens with Mayo, what happens with all this, it's all going to be on them. It's just a totally different situation. So that was one of my other observations about last night. I thought being a Patriots fan and a season ticket holder for over 30 years and just seeing the way that Kraft, the kind of reception he typically has gotten, in Foxborough over those 30 plus years I've been a season ticket holder, I thought Kraft got a relatively tepid reception as well last night. Like, people usually are enthusiastic about Kraft, usually gets huge round of applause, huge cheers. I think his star has fallen a lot amongst his reputation amongst the opinions of his own fandom. And I thought that last night it was positive vibes only. So people were cheering for him, but I didn't think he got the real kind of enthusiastic, cheer from the audience that he would have a few years ago.
No, and it certainly wasn't the cheer that Belichick got. It certainly wasn't the cheer that Brady got, right? And I think, one thing that I thought would have been nice, right? I know, the whole point is to talk about Tom's career and the dynasty and that Patriots era. But wouldn't it have been kind of nice? You think about it, you got your new coach now, Gerard Mayo. You got your new GM now, Elliott Wolf, right? You got Jonathan Kraft, who's taking on a much larger role so that Robert Kraft, I think, could kind of maybe step back a little bit, right? Yep. In his older age. Wouldn't it have been nice to maybe at some point have like the three of them on the stage together at the beginning and just acknowledge the greatness of the past and kind of let everybody know at Gillette Stadium that, hey, this is what we're striving for in the future. This is what we're working to recreate. I mean, did you think that would have been nice? Or do you think that would have been overstepping and taken away from the event?
I don't think it would have been overstepping. I just think it would have been inappropriate because you know what? What right does anyone from this new regime have to even, put themselves at the footstep of Brady and Belichick? Like, it's not fair to Elliott Wolf to even ask him to have any voice when it comes to Brady and Belichick, because they have accomplished so much more than he has ever accomplished. So I get why they kept Wolf away. I get why Jonathan Kraft was kind of kept away. And you know what, Justin? I also am glad they didn't mention Drake May's name once either. And I don't think he was even there, as far as I know, because I just think that's such an unfair position to put Drake May in. So I hear what you're saying, but I think it was probably for the best that new regime was kind of just a little bit off to the side and not more than a little bit off to the side, just not really there.
Yeah. And you know what? I totally get that. I think the reason why I say that is because in my mind, it comes off to me as instead of there being this like continuous transition, right? This peaceful transition of power where we see a new group come in to kind of take the reins and lead the next generation of Patriots teams and the organization. It doesn't feel like that was a smooth transition. It feels like the door was shut. We closed off the past, and now we're going in a completely new route for the future. Like that to me is why I think it maybe would have been nice to do that. It's just because it would have symbolically represented that this is still a unified organization. The Patriots of new are still the same organization that accomplished what the Patriots of old did. But now it almost feels to me like you have a completely new organization. Like it almost feels like they cut the cord and they're starting from scratch.
It definitely does feel like that, to be honest with you. It feels like it's like almost like a new organization.
Yeah.
I kind of agree with it though. I feel like it's important for them to not get stuck in the past. I feel like these are all new guys. And I feel like it's time for them to write their own stories, to have their own legacies, and to achieve their own accomplishments. They cannot be stuck in the past of what Brady and Belichick did. This is why, again, this is another criticism of Mayo. Stop bringing up Bill Belichick. Stop talking about him. Stop joking about him. Stop saying how he used to do things. Yeah. Forget about Bill Belichick. I don't want to hear anything more about Bill Belichick from Gerard Mayo. It's time to move on. What are you going to do, Gerard Mayo, to make your own legacy and your own impact? Stop talking about how, all the little innuendos about Bill Belichick. That's the past. And so I understand what you're saying. It may be nice to give that appearance of continuity, and you might be right, but I kind of get the idea to make a clean break and bury the past. I would encourage Gerard Mayo to take that approach as well.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I mean, we'll see. I mean, we're getting to the point where, camps are going to be coming in soon. I mean, activity is going to start to ramp up. People are going to be in the media more. And I'm very curious to see how Gerard approaches this offseason, both from a personnel standpoint in terms of like what he does with the guys he's got in the roster, how he prepares for the season, and how he handles the media in the press as coverage ramps up and activity ramps up.
Yeah, I mean, these are all huge questions. And I think, and let's be honest, Justin, like not only how he handles those things in the summer, but how he handles those things when the losses start piling up, because this is most likely going to be a tough start for them and probably a developmental year for them. So if they're 2-6 in October, and how is Gerard going to handle that? What's going to happen in this locker room? How is he going to manage the locker room when things go south? And I think that's going to be one of the real questions going into this year. All right, man. Any other observations from last night?
So one other thing that just came to mind real quick is, it's funny because the whole message, especially when Brady and Belichick took over at the end, right, was that it was a joint effort, right? It wasn't you, it wasn't me, it was us. They both, they were equally responsible. They both were the two main factors for success with that dynasty, right? And you have that event last night and you go all out and you do that great ceremony for Tom Brady. I wonder what they do for Bill Belichick, because if you don't have the same, you know what I mean? If you don't have the same type of show, the same type of spectacle that you put on for Brady, and you do something, maybe in a smaller scale for Belichick, are you implying as the organization that Brady was more responsible than Bill, right? I almost feel like you put yourself in a weird situation where you now have to do the same for Bill, or else you're kind of implicitly stating something.
Well, shame on them if they don't do the same thing for Bill, because he deserves 100% the same degree of tribute and honor. And, as a fan, I expect them to do something similar for Bill Belichick. And I hope they do. But I think a lot of fences are going to have to be mended before that can even possibly happen, because there's clearly a tremendous amount of bad blood still for Belichick towards Kraft, and rightfully so, right? Yeah. I mean, I get. No, I don't say rightfully so, but I understand where Belichick is coming from. And who knows, Justin, the next time we see Bill Belichick in Gillette Stadium, it might be as an opponent's coach.
Yeah, it's very well possible. And I think the one last thing too that I want to point out about the difference between the Brady Belichick dynamic and the Belichick Kraft dynamic, right? In terms of like their relationship, their ability to mend fences, all that stuff, is Belichick got his way with Brady, right? Belichick didn't get his way with Kraft. So I feel like it was a lot easier for Bill to mend with Brady if Brady was willing to, because, Belichick got his way. But I feel like Belichick's the type of guy who's so stubborn and, very egotistical, right? And does the fact that he got the short end of the stick in that altercation impact his ability to move on from it?
I think that's a very fair question, because he definitely did not get what he wanted in this situation. I mean, I think, Justin, you tell me if you disagree with this. Like, I 100% think Bill Belichick would still want to be coaching here this year. Like, Bill Belichick did not want to be let go. He wanted to stay and continue with the program.
Yeah, I think so wholeheartedly. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of questions there with the Belichick and the Kraft relationship, and it's gonna be, I guess, interesting to see. But I mean, what are we all going to be seeing in October if they're like 2-5 or something? It's really going to hammer home a lot of this kind of regrets, frankly, that I think a lot of us will have. And did we pull the trigger too soon on Belichick, kind of like Belichick did with Brady? That question is very much still out there. Okay, one last thing before we wrap it up. Anything else from last night?
Last thing I'll say is it really hit home more than ever last night that what a damn shame that we didn't get Randy Moss a ring.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
A good one. Yeah,
that to me, like, you saw the love for him, the love that he had for us. And, you think back to his dominance in a Patriots uniform, the dominance that the team had, almost pulling off undefeated season, etc. What a shame we couldn't get that guy a ring.
Yeah. I mean, can you agree with me that that 2007 Super Bowl loss was literally the most excruciating sports loss that you've ever seen in your life. Like, could you imagine a worse loss?
Hands down. Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, absolutely.
So you're right. It was a shame that Moss never was able to get a ring. I mean, you can tell Moss has like sincere love for kind of Patriots Nation in his time here. And I bet you he wishes he played his whole career here in Foxborough. He probably would have even had a better career if he had been able to get here sooner. I got one more observation before we wrap it up for last night. And we got to talk quick about Peyton Manning, right?
Oh, yeah.
And like, you know, it's great that Manning can joke about himself, and I think that's very relatable, and we all laugh about it. It's like very jocular and it's humorous, and it's great in terms of being a TV personality. But don't you think that's like a little window into why Brady always had that little edge over him and was ultimately a better player than Manning? Could you ever in 1,000 years see Tom Brady up there making that much, you know, humor about him and his competitive performance on the field the way Manning does? Like, I just couldn't see Brady making himself the butt of. I know he did the roast, don't get me wrong, but I felt like with Manning, it's almost like a self-depreciating kind of different kind of humor that I think does try to window into why maybe Brady always had that little edge over Peyton.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, it's funny. I mean, they talked about their relationship and, you know, how good of friends they were both during and after their playing careers. I wonder how good that relationship would have been if Manning was the one, you know, beating Tom 3 out of every 4 times and winning Super Bowls, right? I don't know if Brady would have been as friendly and as willing to be buddy, but to your point, Manning was.
It just feels like Manning is a little more okay with losing. Not to say, I mean, Manning's a competitor, don't get me wrong, but like, you know, he's not maybe, you know, you look at what separates your Jordans and your Bradys and, you know, that next level, you know, type of player.
Yep.
And it really is that super nutso competitive streak is one of the things that really separates the creme de la creme, if you will.
Yep.
And I just thought it was a little window into that last night. Like, you know, Brady just has that edge that Manning doesn't quite have, as great as Manning was.
Yep.
Manning got a huge ovation too, by the way, which I thought was really nice. Some people did boo him though when he first took the stage, which is kind of funny. But I was cheering him the whole time.
I also thought it was kind of funny too. I don't think Tirico intended to do this, but Mike Tirico at one point he made a comment and he was trying to talk about their greatness, right? And he said between two of them, you know, we got 7 Super Bowls. He completely omitted
I heard that.
Manning's accomplishments, right? He just touched on Brady's.
It's actually 9 between the two of them.
Exactly.
I noticed that too.
And I saw Manning's face too during it. Manning had this look in his face like, I just got snubbed. Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's another thing too. Again, you know, you talk about the history of the NFL and the Brady Manning rivalry too. I mean, that really goes down as one of the really the I would say the backbone, one of the backbone rivalries of the league is kind of built on. And how lucky were we to get to watch that for all those years? Just tremendous theater every time. And Manning joked about it a lot, but he actually did have some success later in his career against the Patriots. I mean, I think that you got to mention that as well.
Yeah.
All right, man. Anything else about last night?
No, just great event. Glad to have gone. Glad to have been a part of it, and sad that it's over.
Sad that it's over. It was the funeral for the dynasty, 100%. And you know what, Justin? It was a fitting tribute. And I will say this, right? The dynasty is gone, but it is not forgotten.
Nope.
And the memories will stay with us, you know, for what they accomplished here and the amount of just entertainment and joy that dynasty brought to so many people's lives in New England and beyond. That will stay with those of us that experienced it for the rest of our lives.
100%. Yep. Couldn't agree more.
All right, quickly. Thoughts on mini camp? Anything? It's been a pretty quiet camp. The only thing I'll say is I do like that the early returns on Drake May are positive, because I think that means something, right? Because half of these quarterbacks drafted are going to become Zach Wilson or Trey Lance.
Yep.
And I think when you get that first look at that guy that you just drafted in your uniform, in your building, in your pads, and if the early returns are positive, I think that's historically, and I'm not just saying that's on speculation. I'm saying you look historically at other players that have come through this program, at other players in other programs. When they come in and they at least look viable right from the beginning, that's a good place to be. Much better that than to have Zach Wilson, who looks like he's over his head from day one and never catches up.
Exactly. No, I think Zach Wilson's a perfect example of somebody that I think was very apparent from day one that this guy doesn't have what it takes to be an NFL quarterback. And while Drake May still has a lot to prove, this is the best you can hope for right now, which is positive news, positive headlines. And even better than positive news is the lack of negative news.
Yeah. Well, if by all accounts he's taking to coaching, right. He's at times looks good. He's at times look bad. He's a rookie, right?
Yeah.
But I don't think he's over his head.
Right.
And you can't say that about all these guys. There are a lot of these guys that get drafted. They come in from day one. Mm-hmm. They're over their head and they never, ever, ever recover.
That's right. Yeah.
And I'll give you a great example, to be honest with you, of this was Gerard Mayo. He came in 2008, and from his first padded practice, people were like, this guy's pretty good. And by the time training camp was around, people were really noticing in the preseason, this guy can play. He ended up having a terrific career. Yep. Edelman's another one. He came right in day one, and this guy's a 7th round pick. He can play.
Yep.
It's better to have the positive buzz from the beginning. It does count for something.
100%. I agree.
That's all I really got. I mean, what else? Ramondre Stevenson contract. I don't know. I wouldn't pay him too much. There's not much else going on right now. It's a quiet time in the calendar.
It is. Yeah. I agree. I think I'm eager to see what happens, with as Drake May continues to progress. I'm very eager to see what happens in this wide receiver room, right? You got a bunch of guys that I think we have hope for, but as far as we're concerned right now, I couldn't tell you who the number 1 or who the number 5 in the rotation is, and I think
both the rookies too, you could say the same thing. Polk and Baker have both gotten good reviews so far. Yes. And I think that counts for something.
Yeah.
So we'll see. I mean, it's a quiet time on the calendar, but training camp is frighteningly not far away, which is kind of crazy. So we are getting there. That's about all we got for Patriots, Justin. Celtics make it back to Boston. What do you think? It's 3-0 right now at the time we're recording this.
I think they close it out. I think they broke the Mavericks' will the other night.
Agreed. And I think the Celtics are far and away the better team.
Yep.
And for people that want to detract from the Celtics are the mirror image of the Patriots, right? The reason why this playoff run has felt so easy for the Celtics is because they're just that much better than everyone else.
Right.
It's the same reason why you look at the Patriots schedule and you're like, wow, this schedule is hard. It's like, no, it's just there's only 3 teams in the league that are as bad as the Patriots. So unless those 3 teams fill out your schedule, you're not going to find 10 winnable games.
Exactly.
It's the same thing it's like exact opposite with the Celtics. There's maybe one other team in the league that can match them, Denver, and they fell apart in the postseason.
Yeah.
So they're better than everyone else. That's why it was so easy. They deserve to be here.
Exactly. And the last thing I'll say about the Celtics is the one thing I've noticed about, even though it's a lot of the same guys, the one thing I've noticed in terms of how they've grown and matured as a team is the Celtics of old would have lost games 2 and 3. Those comebacks at the end, they really got the pressure put on and they were resilient. Those are games that the Celtics would have lost a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago. So to see them hold strong and close out 2 and 3 against adversity, I think that was a super positive sign. And again, I think they broke the Mavericks' will the other night. I think they closed it out in Dallas. I'd love to see them do it in Boston, but again, I'm just so afraid of what happens if you just let a team get one. Yeah. So just go close it out in Dallas and take care of business on Friday night.
I agree with that because let's face it, this team has been under a tremendous amount of pressure to win their first title based on what's happened the last couple of years. The Heat last year, Golden State a couple years before that. They need to win and get the monkey off their back. And I think things could change really quick in terms of like the pressure being on them, especially now with Porzingis probably being out for the rest of the postseason. I think he's an X factor that makes a difference. I want them to I'd love it to be in Boston, but at this point, I'll take it any way it comes. I think it's so huge. It's so important for them to just get that first one won. And let me ask you this, we're a football podcast. We're not a basketball podcast, but I don't know where you came in on the Marcus Smart thing, but for those of us, and I'm not like a green teamer, I'm a pretty big Celtics fan. I wouldn't say I'm a green teamer. I've been saying trade Marcus Smart for 3 years. I just felt like it didn't work. It just didn't work. I felt like the harm outweighed the good. Can we take a victory lap at this point for those of us that have been arguing with the green teamers that it's time for Marcus Smart to go?
Yeah.
Yeah,
and you know what? I'll be the first to admit that I was a little hesitant when we sent him away, right? I looked at him as our veteran leader, right? I looked at him as, the guy who would make the hustle plays, the guy who could lock down, the other team's number one. But we really upgraded with Drew Holiday, and it was, I feel bad for Marcus Smart. I feel bad that he came in, dedicated himself to being a tough-nosed, gritty Celtics player, spent his entire career here, and then we ship him off and we're going to go win a championship. I feel bad, but you know what? It had to be done, and it looks like those people were right that were cheering that on. So kudos
the problem is Smart is a tough-nosed, gritty, hard-nosed, scrappy player.
Right.
That also believed he was one of the 10 best players in the league. Exactly. That was the problem. If Marcus Smart could have just been what he was, he would have been fine.
Yep.
But he didn't think that that's what he was.
Exactly.
And it just didn't work. And I think in a strange way, the chemistry between him, Brown, and Tatum, you could just see it. It didn't work that well. Or it was good, but not good enough.
Yep.
And I think that it was addition by subtraction. Holiday is just a much better fit. And the other thing, Al Horford is a much better player than people give him credit for still. He's a great, even still now, very, very good.
36 years old. Yeah, he's turning back the clock for this. That's a guy who I want to see get a ring, and I hope he's about to get one on Friday.
No doubt. And most of all, though, I'll be happy for Tatum because I think he deserves one. And, look, at the end of the day, I've been critical of Tatum at different times, but you got to say, first team All-NBA, and you win a title. I mean, say what you will about the guy, but that's pretty hard to argue with at that point.
It's hard to argue with. And I've said this before. I think once the team gets this monkey off their back and they get that first championship, I think it's very reasonable to say that because this is still a young team, a young core. Yep. They got all their guys locked up for the next 2, 3, 4 years. If they're able to win this first championship, I don't see any reason why that doesn't boost their confidence through the roof and they come back and rattle another 2 in the next couple of years. I mean,
they're going to have a 3 to 5 year run, and we just saw this with the Patriots too. When a team is in that position, then guys will make sacrifices to come play with that team to win a ring. How many players did that to be with Brady?
Yep.
Players are going to start doing that with the Celtics, especially in the NBA, where the players can kind of dictate their terms and get to where they want to be. We've seen that. You're going to see that happen too. So they really are positioned to go on a great run, but they just had to get the monkey off their back. Yep. And I think that the door just kind of opened. But I will maintain that the reason why it feels so easy is because they are that good, and they kind of deserve to be exactly where they are. Like there was no team in the NBA that could, I think, really truly match them. So that's why when you go through the playoffs and we're the better team, they're the better team because they're so much better than the field. They won 60 something games. They were the clear best team. A team that good only comes around once every few seasons in the NBA.
Exactly. They got that perfect combination of depth, star power, the average age of the team. Everyone's in their prime. I mean, they've all been playing together for years, or the nucleus of the team's been playing together for years. I think it just all came together this year for them, and I'm really glad to see it. Yeah.
Someone just get Porzingis, Kurt Schilling's bloody sock, and we'll be all set. Get him out there, man. Right for the last game. All right. Well, that's all the time we have. We're going to wrap it up. We want to thank everybody that listened to this version of the Dr. Football Podcast, the Brady TB12 night wrap-up edition. We will be back recording at some point in the next few weeks as content and material allows. And keep an eye on our Facebook page. Remember, we are changing our name to the Ultimate Patriots Podcast at some point, but we're working on that because I think we're lost in like Facebook quagmire, Facebook limbo on that. But that will happen soon. So keep an eye open for that. Certainly by the training camp, that should all be worked out. So thanks to everyone that listened, and we'll catch you next time.